Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Facebook Live video. And last week I said we were going to be doing 4 videos on a series of the 4 pillars of classroom management. And we got through 2 of them. It was a little bit rough, not exactly as I anticipated. So now we're going to try to be a little bit more, less ambitious, a little bit more modest. And instead of doing 4 videos a week, we're going to cut it down to 2. And that will hopefully allow us to be more on target with the expectations. So we're up to actually pillar number 3. So we have the 4 pillars of classroom management. Last week we spoke about attendance and we spoke about encouragement. And today we're going to talk about everybody's favorite topic. That's right. Why did you go into teaching? Because you love dealing with behavior management issues. That's why. Isn't that the reason why? Don't we go into teaching because we love the kids that just give us a hard time? We just love those kids. So that's the reason why we come into teaching. We love dealing with behavior management issues. And here are 6 questions that we can ask that are commonly asked or thought about when it comes to behavior management issues. So the first question is, why is behavior management so difficult? It's an obvious question. We have a lot of different answers and we'll explore it. We'll jump into it in a moment. Number 2, why don't the incentive programs or point systems work? There are certain kids that it does work for, but very often, especially as you get further and further into the year, these kids are just not motivated by the point systems, by the incentive programs. Why not? What's the problem there? And what can we do about that? Number 3, how do I balance the attention that I need to give this particular struggling student with the rest of the class? There are always a handful of kids that take up the majority of our attention. And I don't know if it's 5% to 95%, meaning 5% of the kids take up 95% of our attention. I don't know exactly what the breakdown is, but if you've been teaching for any considerable amount of time, you're going to know that it's a handful of kids, sometimes even 1 or 2, that take up what seems to be like all of your energy. This kid is always on your mind. How do you manage that balance? Number 4, can I implement a class-wide behavior strategy, or do I need to have it tailored to the individual? Okay, now obviously, on one hand, you want to do something class-wide. It's easier to implement something class-wide than to have a separate plan for this one, for that one, for the other one. But different kids sometimes need individualized plans. How do I do that? How do I balance that? Number 5, and sometimes, you can't help but wonder, am I a teacher or am I a babysitter? Am I here just to manage all these behavior issues? Or is my job to actually teach certain material and cover the curriculum, cover the ground that needs to be covered? And number 6, and this is really a particularly painful one for teachers, is it fair that my performance as a teacher is evaluated based on how these kids that are struggling are misbehaving? Is it fair to give me a lower grade as a teacher in a teacher evaluation because of the kids that are misbehaving? So obviously these are questions that we all struggle with in one way or another. You may have asked these questions, maybe not exactly in these words, but these are things that we all think about when it comes to dealing with behavior management. And I want to go through each one point by point, and then we'll jump into a ClassStars demo so that you can see how ClassStars helps with this. So why is behavior management so difficult? The main reason why behavior management is so difficult, from my experience, from my opinion, and again, not just my opinion, but research, is that you have to know how to measure behavior issues. You cannot manage what you can't measure. This is an old quote from an old friend, Ed Demings, who is not the most famous person, definitely deserves to be more famous than he is, but he was a person who was very keen on quality. And the first step into, if you want to do something well, you've got to be able to measure it. And how do we measure misbehaviors? How do we measure kids that are misbehaving? We usually go with the anecdotal measurement. They act it out. It's usually they come onto our radar after acting out over a long period of time. They're kind of on our radar, and then we start paying attention to the little anecdotes of misbehavior, whether it's this disruption here or not having their work completed over there. And then we kind of in our minds figure out that these are the kids with the behavior issues, and then we call in the reserves. Then we call in, the psychologists, social workers, guidance counselors, whatever other support system you may have in your particular school to help with these cases. And the truth of the matter is that we're not well served to manage behavior this way. That would be like asking you to bake a cake and not giving you a measuring cup or measuring spoons and just telling you, just estimate, just figure it out, just see, a little bit of this, some of that, and see what you can do. If you have good measuring tools, if you have good tools to measure misbehavior, you're going to be much better at managing the behavior. That's just the way it goes. So the reason why behavior management is so difficult is because the tools that we have to measure misbehaviors are not the best. So we're going to jump into that a little bit more and see if we can actually come up with a better way of measuring behavior. Why doesn't the incentive program or point system work? Okay, now here's the thing that you need for a point system. You need to understand why these kids are misbehaving in the first place. Very often, the reason why these kids are misbehaving in the first place, and that also plays into some of the other questions, is because they are just not capable of doing what they need to do. They don't have the skill that is necessary. They're pressured. There's stuff going on that makes it difficult for them to do what they need to do. And what I often explain to parents when I'm working with parents is that there are certain things that incentives work for. If you have a skill and you're not motivated to use that skill, I can supplement motivation with an incentive. So for example, if let's say I bring in a heart patient, I bring somebody that needs a heart transplant, and you are not a heart surgeon, you don't have the skill to do it, there is no incentive in the world that is going to make it possible for you to do this heart surgery because you just don't have the skill. I would have to teach you how to do a heart surgery. Now, if you're a highly skilled surgeon and you'd rather play golf, I can offer you a certain amount of money that will make it worthwhile for you to not play golf today and come in and do the surgery. So incentives work when the skill is present and there's a lack of motivation. And, in those cases, the incentives work fairly well, sometimes even pretty well. But you will find that with kids that are lacking skills, kids that just don't have it together, the incentive is not going to motivate them. And especially since they feel like they just can't do it. When they start to get discouraged and they feel like they can't do it, they feel the incentives are not going to help them do it either. So incentives work in specific cases, but in many, many cases, the incentive is just the wrong intervention. And like any time that you implement the wrong intervention, you're not going to get the desired outcome. Number 3, how do I balance the attention that I need to give to this struggling student with the rest of the class? Now, it's true that in many cases, there are a handful of students that just need the most attention. And you need to realize that there are different tiers of needs. Okay, there's the basic needs that everybody needs, and that's for sure something that everybody needs to get. But then you need to identify those students that need more attention, and they need more. That's it. It's plain and simple. They're going to need more. And as long as you're meeting the needs of the class on tier 1, then you move on to tier 2 and you help those other kids. And sometimes you need to call in extra help. Sometimes it's beyond the scope of the classroom and the teacher's role in the classroom to be providing all of this extra support. So you need to get in, the extra help. But that's important to recognize. Number 4, can I implement the behavior strategy class-wide or must it be tailored to the individual? So the truth of the matter is that it does need to be tailored to the individual because different kids have different needs and they need individualized responses. But if you can adopt a strategy, a class-wide strategy, where let's say you're looking at a tier 1, where you're providing a certain level of it's not intervention because it's the class, this is the class management. This is how you deal with everybody in the class. And then a second tier where you have responses to kids that need other things. You can take the same philosophy and apply it everywhere. And for example, when I work with people in my practice, very often I'll tell people that the problem is you need to have adequate boundaries. You need to have fair boundaries. And boundaries is something that is one word and it's a system, but obviously will mean different things to different people depending on the circumstances. So you have a general philosophy, you have a general strategy that can be personalized to the individual. And I'll explain to you a little bit more when we jump into the Class Stars demo, how we do that in a specific sense. Philosophically, you might be thinking, hey, what exactly are you talking about? What do you mean? How does that work? How does that work practically in my classroom? I'll show you that momentarily. Number 5, am I a teacher or am I a babysitter? The answer is that you're not only are you a teacher and a babysitter, but you're 1,000 other things for these kids. You're their support, you're their you're their positive outlook, you're a role model, you're so many things for these kids. And like we said earlier, sometimes you do need to manage these behavior issues. Like I said at the onset, I've never met a teacher who said that they came into the field because they just love working with these, with problems. They love working with behavior issues. In the mental health field, there are people that love working with a particular kind of problem. Sometimes it's because they themselves struggle with this problem and they feel like they can help with this problem. So let's say somebody likes working with people that are suffering from depression. They may have a good handle on the pathology of depression, and that they can relate to people that struggle with depression and they can help them well. And there you do have people that come in because they want to work with a particular problem. But in general, we come into education because we love working with kids, we love teaching kids, and we want to build them up like that. So, that's something that's important to keep in mind, and it only adds to the challenge of behavior management. And finally, question number 6 is a fear that someone else's misbehavior should reflect poorly on me. The truth of the matter is that it's not fair. What's fair is that you're doing the best that you can. The problem is that how do you measure a good teacher working with a difficult situation when your goal is to have student performance? When your goal is student performance and you have different kids that can perform at different levels, inevitably it's going to reflect poorly on you when students don't perform at a certain level. And it's not fair, because why in the world should a kid who has difficulties, who maybe shouldn't even be in this classroom in the first place, as many teachers have told me, this child doesn't belong in this classroom in the first place. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Without getting in specifics, everybody's different. But the point is that there needs to be a metric, there needs to be some tool, and it gets back to what we said earlier about how we measure misbehaviors, how we measure teachers' responses to struggling students. There needs to be a way to measure your effort even when you're not getting the student to do what they need to do. A student who's struggling should not automatically count against you if you can show how you're doing everything that you can do to help the student. So these are the questions, these are the answers. Let's jump into a Class Stars demo so you can see how this looks in real time. So we're going to do the screen share, jump into the good old Class Stars demo page, and here, demo class, and here we are in the dashboard. Let's start our session for today, and we're going to call our session today Behavior Management, everybody's favorite, and we're going to put an exclamation point at the end of it because we just love it so much. It's so exciting for us. Okay, so let's start the session. So of course, as you know, with Class Stars, we start off taking attendance, and the first thing that we're going to do is take attendance. And we're going to take attendance here because attendance very often plays into behavior management. If somebody's not showing up to class enough, if someone is chronically absent, that's going to run into their behavior issues. So let's say Kennard, Jocelyn, and Norman. Let's take these 3 kids here in a row. We're going to choose them to be absent, and then we're going to end attendance. Let's go to class. So now we're in class. Okay, and how do we typically mark attendance? We're typically looking to teach our lesson, right? We don't come into class with a clear objective of let me start marking behavior issues. You come in, you want to engage the students like we discussed last week. You want to start off, with a positive spin. You want to start off engaging people in a positive way, and that's what you're going to do. So we'll put it on single swipe to make it really simple. And again, I'm going to use the arrow for the demo, but remember that you're meant to use your finger. It's much more intuitive if you're holding your iPad or your Android tablet or your Windows tablet and you're just swiping along with your finger. So you start off your class, and the first thing that you want to do is give some positive feedback. And again, like we spoke last time, we want to prioritize the kids that have no green in their 2-day meter. We haven't engaged them at all. So I'm going to give Rafi some positive feedback, maybe go to the back of the room. Satara sitting back there in the corner, she had no positive feedback the last couple of days, just had one, not much, but he had one, but we can give him some positive feedback too. You don't have to be so strict about it, but let's make sure that we're getting to Kristen, we're getting to Darwin. Okay, we're getting here to Barat, we're getting to Bobby, and I'm giving positive feedback around the class. I didn't get to everybody right away. That's okay. I have the whole day to get to everybody. We're just 2 minutes in. We have here this little countdown clock where if you set a schedule, it'll count down from an hour because the default class is an hour, but you can change that. You can also change it to a regular clock, and when I hit that, now it's just going to give me the time. So now we're here at this time. It's 5:31 in the afternoon here in New York City, and we're working our way way through. That's just a little feature here that I never mentioned. Okay, and after a couple of minutes, Kennard comes in late to class. I'm going to double tap on him and I'm going to mark that he's late. And now he's marked late. If I tap on him again, you see that he's late here, and even he has a good excuse, so I'm going to mark that his lateness is excused. So that's fine. Okay, and that L is going to stay there until I engage him, because I may have thought that I engaged him in the first go around of positive feedback. But like I said before, no one's coming in thinking, okay, let me be prepared for misbehaviors. That's not, typically the first thing that we think of. Now, a lot of good teachers do think about this. So if you're thinking, well, I do think about this, then congratulations, because you're from those good teachers, which is not surprising, because most teachers that take an interest in this kind of stuff are the good teachers. So, just the fact that you're watching this already shows, the kind of teacher that you are. And here, suddenly, you notice that Darwin is acting out. So if you have it on single swipe mode, all you're going to do is swipe down. You're just going to swipe down on Darwin, and then if you want, you can record that it was a relatively mild compared to what he's usually doing, not as bad as he's usually acting out. So I'm going to give it a 3 frowny face rating, a 3 out of 5. So that's not the worst. 5 out of 5 is the worst, obviously. Nothing would be the same as a 1. So if I'm going to tap it as 1, I don't need to do anything, but I can mark it a 2, 3, 4, or 5 over here. And then I also have the option of recording my response. What is my response to Darwin? Do I give him a warning? And I tap on warning if I did that. If I tap on it again, it goes away. Maybe I'm just redirecting him. So I tap redirect. I want to redirect Darwin, and I just mark off that after I swipe down on him, I redirected him. So he's back on task. Perfect. And then I continue going to give positive feedback. Give Franklin some positive feedback. He needs it. Davey needs some positive feedback. And now I'm going to teach my lesson. I put down my ClassStars tablet. I teach my lesson. And maybe I'm really comfortable with ClassStars, so we're going to take it off of the single swipe mode down here at the bottom. But this toggles back and forth. And again, in the settings, you can customize it to have single swipe for swiping in one direction and full function in another direction. So you can customize that here very quickly by tapping on the settings gear and going to swipe options and customizing it. It toggles between A and B. So if I hit this button here, then it'll stay on full function for swiping down, and it'll be single swipe only for up and for real-time attendance. So you can customize that. But let's get back to class here. You don't want to be really playing around with this during class. You can do this before class or after class. So we're going to be on full function mode, and then suddenly I noticed that Stevie here is talking. So I swipe down on Stevie, and now I have the wheel with the basic misbehaviors: conflict, disruptive, distracted, not seated, other, in case we missed something, talking, or unprepared. So in this case, Stevie was talking, so I tap on talking, and it was, again, relatively mild, and I'm going to minimize the trigger. Right, let's say I decide that I'm going to switch a seat. Okay, so I don't want him sitting next to Elijah, so I'm going to switch a seat. So I'm going to do this quick seat switch. Let's go to arrange layout. Okay, and now I'm going to now I'm on this screen, I take Stevie, and I'm going to move him, switch him with Darwin, because I know that Darwin is really good when he's near Elijah. I'm going to end arrange. I'm going to save my changes, and now I'm back in class. I've minimized the trigger. Stevie is now up here in the corner. Darwin is now next to Elijah. They're not going to be talking to each other. That's done. Okay, so I've done that. Continue along my lesson. Maybe Valentine now got out, is distracted. So I'm going to tap on that, and I've marked that Valentine did that. So again, I can record misbehaviors in greater detail by using the full function mode. I can record the intensity, and I can record my response. I can record it more simply in single swipe mode, and I can even get rid of this response bar. If I go to the settings again, there is in user settings, I have the switch here, event responses. I can turn that off, and when I do that, I will not get the event response bar when I swipe down. So if Bonnie, let's say, is being disrupted, or she's unprepared, let's say she's unprepared, okay, you don't see that event response bar. It's there. So if it's too much for you, you can get rid of it that way. Okay, so now what are we doing here? The system here, the idea here is when we're looking at misbehaviors, the way we measure kids that are misbehaving is with two metrics. We're looking at the frequency of the misbehavior, and we're looking at the intensity of the misbehavior. Okay, by putting it on single swipe, we make it super simple to measure the frequency of the misbehavior, and you don't need a very high threshold of misbehavior to start marking it down, because it's so simple to just swipe. A misbehavior that's not so disruptive, that's not so intrusive to the lesson, can also be recorded. And then after a week of this, you have a baseline. You have an idea of how often or how intensely a particular student is misbehaving. Now, any student that's misbehaving, you always want to engage them in something positive, because you don't ever want a kid to only have down swipes. And like we spoke about last time, and we're going to get a little bit more into it now, the border color around each kid tells you the ratio of up swipes to down swipes. When you add a new student to the class, or when you start setting this up in the first place, if the first event that you record is a down swipe, then that student will have a red border. And the reason for that is not for you to penalize the child. It's not in order to get this kid in trouble, but that's to remind you as the teacher that this kid has more swipe downs than swipes up. So you have to catch them being good. You need to engage them in a positive way. So the more positive feedback you give, the more they think that you see them in a positive light, because that's your interaction. Again, your tone of voice, the way you interact with kids, if you react to them around positive things, they will think of you in a positive way. If all of your interactions with them are negative, or if most of your interactions with them are negative, then they're going to look at you in a more negative light. So the basic philosophy, coming back to having a behavior strategy with the entire class, is that you want to give every kid positive feedback. You want to have every kid to have in their 2-day meter, and we're going to put it on single swipe just for the simplicity of it. You want to have everybody having swipe ups. Okay, and particularly Kennard, because he came in late. So we're going to swipe up on Kennard, and after a couple of seconds, that little late thing will go away. But you want to make sure that everybody's getting positive feedback. The thing is that the kids that are also misbehaving are not going to have the same border colors as the kids that are not misbehaving. The blue border represents a 5-to-1 positive to negative ratio. So Colin is actually getting way more positive feedback than misbehaviors, which is fine. He's still entitled to get his fair share every day, his tier 1 fair share. But a kid like Darwin, or a kid like Elijah, or a kid like Stevie, they're at a ratio of between 1-to-1 and 3-to-1. Okay, when they get to a 3-to-1 ratio, their border will turn red. So you want to prioritize these kids and really make sure that they're getting positive feedback. You want to really put the kids with the orange borders on top. And once all the kids with the orange borders have, now again, tier 1 is making sure that everybody has, but once everybody has, you're going to prioritize the kids with the orange borders. And again, when you're swiping up, you can also record the intensity of that. And this way you have a clear philosophy of engaging every kid in a positive way. And the kids that are struggling are going to get more positive feedback. And they may dominate your attention. They may dominate your attention because they need your attention the most. So the way we budget our attention is by, number 1, tier 1, making sure that everybody's gotten enough positive feedback. And tier 2 is to identify those kids that need it the most by looking at the behavior, at the misbehaviors, the swipe downs. Now, once you do this, let's end the class. And let me show you how you're able to use class stars to really, really get a sense of what's going on. And even the kids that are struggling despite your positive feedback, how you can sit down with parents, with administrators, and show that you're actually working hard for this kid. So let's, again, on the behavior dashboard, we're going to select all the dates. We're going to look at all the sessions just to make it colorful. And again, remember, these are sample kids. This is sample data. So here, the top one is for the, this is the snapshot dashboard. It's highlighted over here. It gives you 3 icons: academic, behavior, and attendance. So when you're looking at behavior, that's the middle one. If they're doing well, it'll be green. If they're doing poorly, it'll be red. And if they're kind of in between, they're going to be yellow. And the way we look at it is we take the average number of misbehaviors in the classroom. The number of misbehaviors that the average kid does is fine. We're not assuming that the average kid is a behavior problem. And then our algorithm is 1 standard deviation behind that is yellow, and 2 standard deviations behind that is going to be red. So we're really looking at you, the way you record misbehaviors. And it's okay when kids misbehave, that's fine. Remember, the primary focus, the primary goal of recording misbehaviors is not to penalize the kids. It's to give them a baseline that these kids need your encouragement. They need your positive feedback. Like I mentioned last time, the kids that are giving you a hard time are more often than not having a hard time. These are kids that are lacking skills. They don't have it together. They need your help. So you want to know how badly they're struggling so that you can give them the adequate encouragement and support. That's the goal here. So the average kid, again, is not assuming, we're not assuming that they're going to be struggling behaviorally, and they're going to have the green icon in the middle. Now, if you want to zoom in and look specifically at behaviors, you tap here on the behavior button, and now you can drill down, and now we're looking specifically at behaviors. And here you have the bar charts of the positives, both behavior and academic, and the negatives. If you tap on the chart, you get to pop out with the 45 positives to 24 negatives. Now, even Satara, who has 24 misbehaviors, 24 swipe downs, and that might not be great, but you could show how much more positive you are with them. And obviously, you need to, it needs to be genuine, real encouragement. You can't just be ticking them off without giving them the encouragement. We're trusting, and typically, my experience is that when you give teachers the right tools, they use it well, they use it properly, and they don't use it to, patronize the kids or anything like that. So this is how you drill down on the first part, and this gives you an overview of the entire class. You can see your entire class all at once. If you want to drill down into a particular student, you tap here on the 3 dots, and now you come to the individual dashboard. And here's where you can see really how things are going over time. You can look at, and this is sample data again, so it's not necessarily going to tell you the story that you're looking for, but you're going to see how it tells you over time how kids are doing. You have a list of every single event that's recorded. You can filter out if you want to look at specific things or not look at specific things, and see the breakdown of how you're interacting with this particular child. So it just takes a little bit longer to come up when we're broadcasting a Facebook video, but it should be coming up momentarily. And again, you have here the timeline at the top, starting at January 1st, 1970. That's because we haven't called in the data yet. This is not how it goes. Oh, here we go. Here we go, September 9th through October 26th. And in a minute, this is going to be populated with a list of every single event. Here we go, encouraging word, encouraging word, encouraging word. And you could look here at the ratio of events that are recorded. These are all the recorded events. The shades of greens are all the swipe ups. The shades of yellows are the academic, and the shades of red are the swipe downs. So this is all recorded records compared to the filtered records, which we haven't engaged any of the filters here. So it's going to be exactly the same. Once I start filtering out, let's say I filter out some dates. So let's bring it across over here. And you're going to see the filtered record donut is going to adjust according with the dates. Oops, sliding that around. Let's move that over here. Again, it's lagging because of the broadcast. When you download this on your tablet and play around with it, you'll see it responding a lot quicker. Let's move it here. You'll see how, now you can see how this has adjusted from this. And the real cool chart is when you pull out this, slide out this chart. When you slide out the bubble chart, here you go. You can see every single event plotted along a timeline. We're dealing with a class that typically goes from 10 until 10:30-ish. Here we have one event that was outside of 10:30, but it's all kind of here. And again, you'll see how kids are reacting to your positive feedback and how they react when you engage them with positive feedback earlier in the day, later in the day. Sometimes kids have a hard time at certain times of the day. All of that is going to be illustrated here. And the goal is that if you're being consistent, and again, if you scroll down here, you can see if you use the response bar, the response will also be in the tile. So you'll have unprepared plus the response if you actually recorded a response. Again, the smiley faces will also be recorded when you do that. That's going to show up here. And a bigger bubble means, more smileys. And if you tap on a bubble, it will actually take you to that event here. So here on September 23rd, You can see it right here, September 23rd at 10:21. You can kind of see that it's approximately 10:21 here in this timeline as well. It's a full 5 smiley faces, good effort. That's right here. That came after, an unspecified negative a little bit earlier at, 10:16. These are smaller ones, but they happen on a lower date. So these happened the day before. This also happened this day. The encouraging word, you can see it's a little bit smaller. So you can see how the bubble chart corresponds to the list. You can filter out which events that you want to look at by tapping on the bar chart and selecting from this list. Again, here you go. Here you have this list, so you could do that. So this is how we record behavior. First of all, you're coming into class with a strategy of how you're looking at behavior class-wide, okay? And obviously it's going to be different as different kids are acting out more frequently, more intensely, more disruptively, if that's a word, disruptively. Those kids are going to start showing up with different color borders, and you're going to have their class stars will pull your attention towards them in a way that is constructive, in a way that is supportive, where you can build better relationships with them. Because I don't know if I mentioned this last time or if you caught this last time, there is this guy, John Gottman, and his wife, Julie, who have been studying relationships for many, many years. They can watch a couple discuss a disagreement and with over 90% accuracy predict if they'll still be together in 10 years. And what they do is so amazing. They just count the numbers of consequences, the number of consequences, compliments and criticisms that they give each other. And what they have found is that in a good relationship, people, while arguing, people will still give 5 compliments to every criticism. And in a bad relationship, they'll give 0.8 compliments to every criticism. It's a huge, huge difference. And when I think about how that translates into a classroom, when these kids are not our peers, okay, they're not as confident as we are, and they, it's a hierarchy. We're the teacher, we're the authoritative figure. Even in the, least authoritative classroom that there is, we're still in charge of them in a certain sense, and they look up to us and they need our support. They probably need more than 5 compliments to every criticism, but who can remember the next day to give compliments based on yesterday's criticisms? Class Stars does that work for you. So we have now a tool that effectively and methodically measures misbehavior. So it's much easier to track misbehaviors. You can actually measure gradual improvement, which is something that I sometimes call invisible progress. When a kid is acting out 5 times a day and then goes to acting out 3 times a day, they're still acting out, but that's progress. And that needs to be noted, that needs to be encouraged. Otherwise the kids will give up, because just like why the point systems don't work, because it doesn't work for the kids. So if they're going to try making progress, making improvement, and we're not going to acknowledge that, they're going to give up. So that's why incentives don't work. How do you balance the needs of one student versus the rest of the class? You have a 2-tiered system. Every kid in the class needs to have engagement, needs to have encouragement, needs to have positive feedback, needs to be part of the discussion. But some kids are going to need more. So you need to make sure that no one is completely neglected. But once everybody gets a little bit of positive feedback, now you need to zoom in on those kids that need it the most. Once you're managing those kids, you can come back to the tier 1. You can shift back and forth between tier 1. You can have a time of the day that you're working with tier 1 kids and a time of the day that you're working with tier 2 kids. So this way, neither group is neglected. How do you implement a behavior strategy class-wide? This is exactly it. It's a 2-tiered system. You get to everybody in a minimal way, and then you identify those kids that need the more intensive second tier. Am I a teacher or a babysitter? You are a teacher and a babysitter and much more. You're sometimes the only thing these kids have got. Sometimes these kids come from backgrounds, and even when they come from not such difficult backgrounds, teachers are so powerful, so influential. You know this, and that's the real reason why you came into teaching. The real reason why you came into teaching is because you know deep down in your heart what kind of an impact you can have on these kids. Now, is it fair that someone else's misbehavior should reflect on my record as a teacher? For now, it is what it is. But if you can show, and you can sit down with your administrators, with your support team, with your student team, with the parents, and you could say, look, your child is struggling in this and this way. This is what we're doing. This is how it's helping. Imagine being able to sit down with the parent and go through a chart like this. And by the way, when you're in the class-wide dashboard, you can sit down with the parent here too. because we don't, you're going to say, well, I can't sit down with a parent and show all the kids data. You definitely can't. But that's why we have the show one button here at the top of the dashboard. And again, excuse the lag here, but this show one button actually makes all of the other student data invisible. So watch this. While on the behavior dashboard here, I have everybody's bar charts. Voila. I said I have everybody's dashboard, everybody's bar charts. Here they are. If I hit this show one button, bam, they're all gone except for Satara. And if I tap, and Darwin. Darwin's is here. This is a lagging issue. There we go. Yeah, so you just make sure before you sit down with the parent that you've, eliminated everybody else's data. Okay, you're going to see this little 2-day meter. That's nothing really significant to a kid. That doesn't really reflect anything of the kid. That's more reflective on you of how you're engaging all these kids, and it can be between nothing and 7. So everybody's got to be within a certain range. That's all that we're showing here. Show all obviously brings everything back here. Tap on the show all button. Okay, and if you slide this menu down, you can hit the arrange layout button and you can move kids around the way we did in class beforehand. You can do that outside of class as well. So if I decide at the end of the day that I want to switch Stevie back with Darwin, the way I had him in the morning, I can do that here without going into class. At the end of range, save the changes, and voila, it's done just like that. Should be going back to that screen, but either way, the screen share is, that's the screen share for today. So that is pillar number 3. Pillar number 3 is behavior management, and it's hard to say that really it shouldn't be pillar number 1, because classroom management is built on behavior management. If kids are behaving well, you can get a lot more done, and if the kids are not behaving, you're not going to get anything done. The reason why we put it as pillar number 3 is because in the process, in the workflow of how you're coming into class, we think that number 1, you should make sure that everyone is there, because obviously if they're not there, there's not really much to work with if they're not there. Number 2, we want to start off with a positive spin, encouragement. And tier 1 really entitles kids to positive feedback independent of whatever the behavior situation is. Everybody deserves to have encouragement and positive feedback. Once you've covered the class and you're giving everybody a fair amount, and again, it's going to be different for different teachers and different kids and different age groups. It's going to, you personalize that to your own style, and the charts will reflect that. So you don't have to worry about that. But once you've covered pillar number 1 and pillar number 2, now you've set the stage for taking this tool, taking class stars into your classroom and using it to measure and respond effectively and methodically to the misbehaviors in your classroom. So that's why that's pillar number 3. Pillar number 4 is academic engagement. Of course, coming back to the other question, am I a teacher or a babysitter? Your role as the teacher is first and foremost, always has to be, primary. As much as you're a role model, as much as you're their role model, social worker, therapist, whatever other support that you provide to them, you have to also teach them, because what you teach them is the knowledge that's going to perpetuate them further as a functioning and productive member of society. So that's always critical, and we'll talk about that in the next one. Hopefully this week, we will get to pillar number 4. Now, I also want to make an announcement, and that is that we're going to be doing a Class Stars pilot program in a couple of weeks. We're waiting another day or 2 to figure out. We're coming out with some updates to make sure that this is going to run smoothly. But Class Stars is available for download right now on your iPad, on your Android tablet at Google Play, and on your Windows tablet, and on your Windows PC for that matter. Although it's better to use your fingers, so it's better to use a touchscreen. But as you see, you can use a mouse, you can use a touchpad. It does work. But in a couple of weeks, we're going to start a pilot program. What we're going to do there is get a bunch of teachers on board, and not a very big group, but a group of teachers that are dedicated, that want to learn how to go through this and how to use this in their classrooms. We're going to do it together. There are going to be videos just like this and better than this. And we're going to take it step by step. And over the course of the week, we're going to have contests, challenges, giveaways. We're going to make it really, really fun. You're going to download it for free. You're going to learn how to use it outside of class. I'll show you how to set up your own class I will be available to answer questions and to provide personalized, customized support to each and every one of you that wants to join this pilot program. And then you're going to use it in your classroom for a week, for 5 days. It's not going to be on weekends. It's going to be Monday through Friday. We're going to do it. And you're going to get to use it, and you're going to see how it really allows you to take your game to the next level, your game as a teacher, your job as a teacher. You're going to understand the learning processes of each and every child in a much more specific and methodic way. So that's coming soon. Stay tuned. Join the Teaching with Positivity Facebook group to stay updated on this. You can also listen to the Class Stars podcast, where each week I put out an episode. This week's episode was talking about the pilot program, so you can catch that wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks again for joining us. And I hope that this was useful for you, and share it with your friends. Let them know about it and get in on the group. So see you next time. Take care.